The massive warship Dreadnought's Edge hung in the darkness of space like a metal beast. Inside its cold halls, 2,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors prepared for what they thought would be an easy battle. These were the Krex soldiers, creatures who had never known defeat. Commander Bale stood before his troops in the main bay. His red eyes glowed as he looked at his army. Each soldier was 8 feet tall with thick armor covering their gray skin. They carried weapons that could melt steel and shields that could stop any attack. At least that's what they believed. Listen well. Bale's voice echoed through the bay. The planet below is called Earth. The creatures there call themselves humans. They are weak and small. We will take their world in one day. The Krex soldiers roared their approval. They had conquered 43 worlds before this one. Humans would be no different. They were just another species to crush under their boots. Lieutenant. Zorn stepped forward. He was Bale's second in command, almost as large and twice as cruel. Commander, our scans show this planet has strange readings. The air is thick with water. There are dangerous storms. Maybe we should be careful. Bale laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Careful? We are Krex warriors. We have fought in the Yi, ice caves of frozen hell. We have battled in the lava fields of Fire Mountain. What can one little planet do to us? The other soldiers laughed too. They had heard stories about this planet Earth. The humans had no real weapons, no armor, no shields. They lived short lives and were afraid of everything. It would be like fighting children. Prepare the drop pods, Bale ordered. We land in 1 hour. Far below, Earth waited. The planet looked peaceful from space with its blue oceans and white clouds. But appearances could be deadly. The landing zone was a place humans called the Amazon. It was a vast green area covered in trees and rivers. The Krex had chosen it because their computers said it was safe. No human cities, no armies, no weapons. Just plants and animals. They had no idea what they were walking into. The drop pods launched like meteors from the mothership. 2,000 metal containers fell through Earth's atmosphere, burning bright as they cut through the air. They crashed into the jungle with sounds like thunder, crushing trees and scaring birds into flight. Commander Bale was the first to emerge from his Buddha. He stepped onto the soft ground and breathed in the thick, humid air. It was different from the clean, recycled air of his ship. This air was heavy and alive with smells he didn't recognize. "Form up!" he shouted to his soldiers. "Establish a perimeter. Mark the landing zone." The Krex warriors spread out through the jungle. They moved like they owned the place, pushing through vines and stepping on flowers. Their heavy boots left deep marks in the muddy ground. Private Jex wiped sweat from his face. "Commander, this air is strange. It's hard to breathe." "You'll get used to it," Bale replied. But he was sweating too. The humidity was unlike anything they had experienced. Their armor, perfect for cold space battles, felt like ovens in this heat. Within the first hour, the jungle began to fight back. Sergeant Kex was setting up a communication device when he felt something bite his neck. He slapped at it, and his hand came away covered in his own purple blood. A tiny insect had somehow found a gap in his armor and injected him with something. "Medic!" he called out, but his voice was getting weak. The poison was fast. By the second hour, 12 Krex warriors were dead, not from human weapons or human soldiers, but from insects smaller than their fingernails. The jungle was full of creatures that didn't fear the aliens. Mosquitoes that carried diseases, spiders that dropped from trees, ants that could bite through metal. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Zorn said as he watched another soldier fall. "Our armor is supposed to protect us from everything." "It's just animals," Bale replied, but his confidence was starting to crack. "We'll adapt, we always do." Then the rain started. It wasn't like the gentle rain of other worlds they had conquered. This was a wall of water that fell from the sky, like a punishment. It soaked through everything, making the ground soft and slippery. The Krex weapons, which used energy cells, began to malfunction in the moisture. "Sir," called out Corporal Rex, "my plasma rifle won't fire. The power cell is wet." "Mine too," said another soldier. Soon half their weapons were useless. The rain kept falling, turning the jungle floor into a swamp. The Kreks, who were used to fighting on solid ground with reliable weapons, found themselves slipping and sliding through mud. But the real surprise came when they encountered their first humans. Dr. Lisa was a scientist who had been studying plants in the Amazon for 3 years. She was small, only 5.5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back in a simple knot. She wore clothes made of natural fibers and carried only basic tools. When she saw the aliens, she didn't run screaming like the Kreks expected. Instead, she watched them from behind a tree, studying them like they were just another species to catalog. "Look at them," she whispered to her guide, a local man named Carlos. "They're completely out of their element. Their equipment isn't designed for this environment." Carlos nodded. He had lived in the jungle all his life. He could see what the aliens couldn't, that they were not predators here. They were prey. "Should we contact the military?" he asked. "Not yet," Lisa replied. "Let's see how they handle the jungle first. I don't think they'll last long." She was right. As the first day turned to night, the Kreks faced their greatest challenge yet. The jungle came alive with sounds they had never heard. Howler monkeys screamed from the trees. Jaguars prowled in the darkness. Snakes slithered through the grass. The aliens, who had always been the scariest things on any planet, found themselves afraid of every sound, every shadow, every movement in the bushes. "Set up night watch," Bale ordered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "4 soldiers on each post. Don't let anything approach the camp." But how do you watch for things you can't see? How do you guard against an entire world that wants you dead? Private Tex was on the first watch when he heard a splash in the nearby river. He aimed his weapon at the water, but saw nothing. Then, something grabbed his leg from below the surface. He tried to scream, but the water filled his mouth. The other guards found only his helmet floating in the bloody river. By morning, they had lost 30 soldiers, not to human armies or human weapons, but to Earth itself. The planet was fighting them with everything it had: disease, poison, predators, weather, and terrain that seemed designed to kill. Commander Bale looked at his remaining forces. They were tired, scared, and sick. Many had infections from insect bites. Others had eaten plants that made them violently ill. Their equipment was failing, their weapons were unreliable, and their morale was breaking. For the first time in his military career, Bale began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. "Sir," Lieutenant Zorn approached him. "Should we contact the ship? Request extraction?" Bale's red eyes burned with anger. "We are Kreks warriors. We don't retreat, we don't surrender. We will conquer this world or die trying." But as he spoke those words, he couldn't shake the feeling that Earth had already made its choice, and it wasn't in their favor. The jungle watched and waited, patient as only nature can be. It had been killing things for millions of years. It knew how to be patient, it knew how to win. The real battle was just beginning. The second day brought no relief for the Kreks warriors. Commander Bale stood over a map of the area, but the jungle had already changed since yesterday. New streams had formed from the rain. Fallen trees blocked paths that existed just hours before. This place was alive and constantly moving. "Status report," Bale demanded. Lieutenant Zorn looked grim. "We've lost 43 soldiers, sir. Most from disease and animal attacks. Our medical supplies are running low. The humidity is destroying our equipment faster than we can repair it." Bale's fist hit the table. "Impossible. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." But the jungle didn't care about their reputation. Dr. Lisa crouched behind a fallen log, watching the aliens through her binoculars. She had been observing them for hours, taking notes like they were a new species of animal. In many ways, they were just that. Creatures out of their natural habitat. "They're making every mistake possible," she whispered to Carlos. "They're drinking from contaminated water sources. They're camping in areas where predators hunt. They don't understand this ecosystem at all." Carlos smiled grimly. He had guided scientists through this jungle for 20 years. He knew every sound, every danger, every safe path. These aliens were like tourists who had wandered into a war zone. "My grandfather used to tell stories," Carlos said quietly. Stories about warriors who thought they could conquer the jungle. The jungle always won. Lisa nodded. Should we contact the authorities now? Not yet, Carlos replied. Let's see how they handled day 2. The aliens were about to get their first real lesson in jungle warfare. Private Dex was filling his water bottle from a stream when something caught his attention. A small splash upstream. Then another. He raised his weapon and scanned the water but saw nothing dangerous. Just a peaceful river flowing through the trees. He knelt down to fill his bottle and felt something wrap around his ankle. Before he could react, he was pulled into the water. The stream was deeper than it looked, and something large was dragging him down. His armor, so protective in space battles, now felt like a stone pulling him to the bottom. The other soldiers heard the splash and rushed to help, but found only bubbles on the surface. Private Dex had become the jungle's latest victim. What grabbed him? Asked Corporal Max, staring at the innocent-looking water. Could be anything, replied Sergeant Vex. Crocodile, anaconda, or something else we haven't seen yet. The truth was worse than they imagined. This jungle was home to creatures that had been perfecting the art of killing for millions of years. The Kreks were just the latest prey to stumble into their territory. Meanwhile, news of the alien invasion had reached the outside world. Colonel Ana Vega received the emergency call at her military base 300 miles away. She was a veteran, soldier who had spent her career preparing for threats but never threats from space. Confirmed alien landing, her radio operator reported. 2,000 hostiles in the Amazon region. No contact with local authorities. Colonel Vega studied the satellite images. The aliens had chosen their landing spot well from a military standpoint. No cities, no major roads, no immediate human threats. But they had also chosen the most dangerous place on Earth. Assemble a response team, she ordered. But don't rush in. Let's see what we're dealing with first. She knew the Amazon better than most soldiers. She had trained there, fought drug cartels there, rescued lost explorers there. If these aliens thought they could just walk through that jungle like conquerors, they were about to learn a hard lesson. Back at the alien camp, Commander Bale was dealing with his first major crisis. Half his soldiers were sick with fever. Their advanced medical scanners couldn't identify the diseases because they had never encountered Earth pathogens before. Sir, reported Lieutenant Zorn, the sickness is spreading. The soldiers are too weak to fight. Then we must be stronger, Bale roared. But even as he spoke, he felt the fever starting in his own body. Something microscopic was winning the Yao, or that their weapons couldn't fight. Dr. Lisa watched the chaos from her hiding place. The aliens were learning that Earth's most dangerous weapons weren't guns or bombs. They were bacteria, viruses, and parasites that had evolved alongside humanity for thousands of years. They have no immunity, she explained to Carlos. Their bodies have never seen these diseases. They're completely defenseless. It was then that Carlos made his decision. We need to contact the tribal leaders. If these aliens survive the jungle, they'll eventually reach the villages. Our people need to know. He disappeared into the forest with the silent skill of someone who had learned to move like the jungle itself. Within hours, drums were beating deep in the Amazon. Messages were being passed from village to village in a language older than any alien civilization. Elder Taka received the message at his village along the river. He was 90 years old and had seen many changes in his lifetime, but never anything like this. Aliens from space dying in the jungle like any other invader. Gather the warriors, he told his grandson Joe. Not to fight yet, but to watch. The jungle is teaching these strangers a lesson. We will learn from both. Joe nodded and disappeared into the village. Soon, dozens of indigenous hunters were moving through the forest like ghosts. They had lived in harmony with this deadly place for generations. They knew its moods, its dangers, and its secrets. The aliens never saw them coming. Captain Rex led a patrol of 15 Krek soldiers through what looked like a safe path between the trees. Their mission was simple: find a clean water source and secure it for the main camp. It should have been easy for warriors who had conquered planets. But this wasn't a planet. This was Earth. and Earth played by different rules. The path led them deeper into the jungle, past flowers that looked beautiful but released toxic pollen when disturbed, past trees that dropped branches without warning, past bushes that hid snakes with venom that could kill in minutes. "Sir," whispered Private Lux, "I think we're being followed." Captain Rex stopped and listened. The jungle was full of sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the wind. But underneath it all was something else, the feeling of being watched. "Defensive formation," he ordered quietly. The soldiers formed a circle, weapons ready. But they were looking for an enemy they could see and fight. The watchers in the trees remained invisible, taking notes on alien tactics and weaknesses. Joe crouched on a branch 30 feet above the aliens. He had been following them for an hour, moving from tree to tree without making a sound. His grandfather had taught him that the best warriors were the ones who struck only when necessary. These aliens were already beaten. They just didn't know it yet. He watched as one of the soldiers stepped on what looked like solid ground. The forest floor gave way and the alien fell into a sinkhole filled with murky water. His armor pulled him down like an anchor. His teammates tried to help, but the mud was too deep and too soft. Another soldier lost to the jungle's natural traps. By the third day, Commander Bale's army of 2,000 had shrunk to fewer than 1,500. They had lost soldiers to disease, drowning, poisoning, and predator attacks. Their weapons were failing, their equipment was breaking down, and their morale was shattered. But the worst was yet to come. Dr. Lisa finally made contact with the outside world. Her satellite phone crackled to life and she spoke directly to Colonel Vega. "Colonel, this is Dr. Lisa in the Amazon. I've been observing the alien force for 3 days. They're not adapting well to the environment. I estimate they've lost several 100 soldiers already." "What's your assessment, Doctor?" Colonel Vega asked. "They're dangerous individually, but they don't understand Earth ecology. They're fighting the wrong enemy. Instead of preparing for human resistance, they should have prepared for Earth itself." Colonel Vega smiled grimly. "Thank you, Doctor. Continue your observations. We're moving response teams into position, but it sounds like you might not need us." As night fell on the third day, the surviving Krex warriors huddled in their camp like frightened children. The jungle surrounded them with sounds of hunting predators and unseen dangers. Commander Bale stared into the darkness and realized a terrible truth. They weren't the hunters here. They were the prey, and the real hunt was just beginning. The fourth day brought disaster from the sky. Commander Bale woke to the sound of thunder, but this wasn't the gentle rumble they had heard before. This was something much worse. The roar of an approaching storm system that would make their previous troubles seem like minor inconveniences. "Sir?" Lieutenant Zorn rushed into the command tent, water already dripping from his armor. "Weather scanners are showing a massive storm front moving in. The readings are impossible." Bale looked at the data and his red eyes widened. Wind speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Rainfall measured in feet, not inches. Lightning strikes every few seconds. This wasn't just weather, this was Earth showing its true power. "How long until it hits us?" Bale asked. "It's already here, sir." The first gust of wind knocked 3 soldiers off their feet. The second gust flattened their communication equipment. By the time the real storm arrived, the Krex realized they were facing something their armor and weapons couldn't fight. Dr. Lisa and Carlos had taken shelter in a cave they knew about, deep enough to stay dry but close enough to watch the aliens. Lisa checked her weather radio and shook her head. "This is a big one," she told Carlos. "Category 5 hurricane strength winds, and it's going to sit over this area for days. Those aliens picked the worst possible time to visit the Amazon." Carlos nodded. "My people have stories about storms like this. They say the jungle uses them to clean house, to wash away anything that doesn't belong." The rain hit like a wall of water falling from the sky. Within minutes, the Krex camp was flooded. Their advanced equipment, designed for the vacuum of space, began failing as water poured into every circuit and component. Private Hex tried to keep his plasma rifle dry, but the rain was too heavy. Water seeped through the weapon's seals and into its power core. When he tried to fire it, sparks flew and the weapon died in his hands. "Weapons are down," he shouted over the storm, but his voice was lost in the wind. All around the camp, similar scenes played out. Energy shields flickered and died. Communication devices went silent. Medical scanners stopped working. The Kreks were discovering that their technology was useless against Earth's raw natural power. The wind was even worse than the rain. It picked up branches and hurled them like spears. It knocked over trees that had stood for centuries. The aliens' temporary shelters were swept away like paper, leaving them exposed to the storm's full fury. Sergeant Core was trying to secure a supply crate when a falling tree branch struck him in the head. His helmet cracked and the jungle's poisonous air rushed in. Within minutes, he was struggling to breathe as alien bacteria invaded his lungs. "Medic!" called his squad, but the medics were dealing with dozens of similar emergencies. The storm was breaking both their equipment and their bodies. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Colonel Vega watched the weather reports with growing amazement. The storm system was enormous, covering thousands of square miles of Amazon rainforest. Any human caught in it would struggle to survive, but at least humans understood the dangers. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're getting fragmentary signals from the alien landing zone. Their transmissions are breaking up, but it sounds like they're in serious trouble." Colonel Vega nodded. "What about our indigenous contacts?" Elder Taka's people have taken shelter in their traditional storm caves. They've been through hurricanes like this before. They know how to survive. That was the difference, Colonel Vega realized. Humans had evolved alongside Earth's dangers. These aliens were visitors who didn't understand the rules. Elder Taka sat in the sacred cave with 30 members of his tribe, including his grandson Joe. The cave had protected their people from storms for hundreds of years. Their ancestors had chosen this place because they understood the jungle's moods. "Grandfather," Joe asked, "will any of the Sky Warriors survive this storm?" Taka listened to the wind howling outside. "Some might live through the wind and rain, but the real test comes after. The jungle will be different when the storm passes. Hungrier, more dangerous. The survivors will face Earth's true fury." He was right. As the storm raged on, it was changing the jungle in ways that would make survival even harder for the aliens. Rivers that had been shallow streams became raging torrents. Solid ground became swampy marshes. Animals that had been hiding from the aliens were now displaced and angry, searching for new territory. Venomous snakes, aggressive insects, and hungry predators were all being driven toward the alien camp. By the second day of the storm, Commander Bale's army had shrunk to under 1,000 soldiers. The storm hadn't killed them directly. Earth rarely worked that simply. Instead, it had weakened them, sickened them, and left them vulnerable to everything else that wanted them dead. Captain Rex led a desperate mission to find higher ground. His squad of 12 soldiers slogged through knee-deep water, trying to reach a hill they could see in the distance. But the jungle had other plans. The water around their feet began to move in ways that water shouldn't move. Something large was swimming beneath the surface, something that had been disturbed by the flooding and was looking for food. "Movement in the water," Rex shouted, raising his broken weapon. But what could he do against a 20-foot anaconda that was perfectly designed for underwater hunting? The snake struck like lightning, wrapping around Private Fox before anyone could react. The alien's armor, so protective against energy weapons, was useless against the crushing power of nature's perfect predator. Fox's teammates tried to help, but the snake dragged him under the murky water. They found only bubbles and the echo of a scream that was cut short. "Fall back," Rex ordered, but there was nowhere safe to retreat to. The entire jungle had become a death trap. Dr. Lisa watched the destruction from her cave and took careful notes. As a scientist, she was fascinated by what she was seeing. The aliens weren't just fighting individual threats. They were fighting an entire ecosystem that had evolved to kill efficiently. "Look at this," she showed Carlos her observations. "They've lost over half their force, and they haven't faced a single human soldier yet. Earth itself is defeating them." Carlos nodded. "My grandfather always said the jungle tests everyone who enters. These aliens are failing the test." On the third day of the storm, something even worse happened. The constant rain had washed away the natural barriers that kept certain areas of the jungle separated. Now predators from different regions were meeting and competing for territory, right in the middle of the alien camp. A jaguar, one of the jungle's apex predators, stalked into the camp looking for food. It had been driven from its territory by flooding and was hungry, angry and desperate. To the jaguar, the alien smelled like meat. Private Jex was standing guard when he saw yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. He aimed his weapon, but remembered, it was broken. He tried to run, but his heavy armor made him slow and clumsy. The jaguar moved like liquid shadow, covering 30 feet in a single leap. Its claws found the gaps in the alien's armor that insects had already discovered. Its teeth were designed to crush skulls, and alien skulls were no different from any other prey. The attack lasted only seconds, but it sent a wave of terror through the remaining soldiers. They were apex predators on their homeworlds, but here, they were just another link in the food chain, and not at the top. By the 4th day, the storm began to weaken, but the damage was done. Commander Bale looked at his remaining forces. Fewer than 700 soldiers out of the original 2,000. They were sick, exhausted, demoralized, and armed with broken weapons. "Sir," Lieutenant Zorn approached him. "The men are asking about extraction. Maybe we should contact the ship and request evacuation." Bale's red eyes burned with fury, but underneath the anger was something new. Fear. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy he couldn't defeat with superior firepower or tactical brilliance. "We don't retreat," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We are Krex warriors. We find a way to win." But as he spoke those words, he could hear the jungle around them coming back to life after the storm. New sounds, new dangers, new threats that his people had never encountered. The storm was over, but Earth's fury was just beginning. The real battle was about to start, and the aliens were already losing. Elder Taka emerged from his cave and breathed the clean air after the storm. The jungle felt different now, charged with energy and ready for what came next. "Now," he told Joe, "now we see what these Sky Warriors are really made of." The test of strength was over. The test of survival had begun. The 5th day after the storm brought a deadly silence to the jungle. Commander Bale stood among the wreckage of his once mighty army, counting the survivors. 637 soldiers remained from the original 2,000. Their armor was cracked, their weapons mostly broken, and their confidence shattered. But Commander Bale was not ready to surrender. In his mind, retreat was impossible. The Krex Empire had never lost a battle, and he would not be the first commander to break that tradition. "Gather the squad leaders," he ordered Lieutenant Zorn. "We're going to make our final push to the extraction point." The extraction point was a clearing 15 miles north of their current position. Their mothership would send shuttles there in 2 days. All they had to do was survive the journey through the deadliest jungle on Earth. Lieutenant Zorn looked at the map with growing dread. "Sir, that route takes us through the deepest part of the rainforest. Our scouts report increased animal activity in that area. Then we'll fight our way through," Bale replied. "We are still Krex warriors. We still have weapons that work. We can still complete this mission." But Bale was wrong about many things. He was wrong about having working weapons. Most of their equipment had failed completely. He was wrong about completing the mission. The mission was already lost. And he was most wrong about fighting their way through, because the jungle was no longer fighting them alone. Dr. Lisa had finally made contact with Colonel Vega's advance team. Captain Mike Santos arrived at her location with 20 elite soldiers, all experts in jungle warfare. They moved through the forest like ghosts, using skills learned from years of fighting in similar terrain. "Doctor," Captain Santos said as he studied her notes, "your observations are remarkable. These aliens have lost over 60% of their force without facing any human resistance." "The jungle is doing our job for us," Lisa replied. "But there's something else. I've been monitoring their communications. They're planning to move toward an extraction point. If they reach it, some of them might escape." Captain Santos nodded. Colonel Vega anticipated this. We have orders to ensure that doesn't happen. Can you guide us to intercept them? Lisa looked at Carlos, who smiled grimly. We know every path in this jungle. If those aliens want to reach their extraction point, they'll have to go through us. Meanwhile, Elder Taka had made his own decision. He stood before 50 of his best warriors, including his grandson Joe. These men had lived in the jungle their entire lives. They knew its secrets, its dangers, and most importantly, how to use both as weapons. The Sky Warriors are weak now, Taka told his people. The jungle has tested them and found them wanting. But they still threaten our home. It's time to show them that this land belongs to us. Joe checked his bow and arrows. The tips were coated with poison from local frogs, a toxin that could drop a jaguar in seconds. His grandfather had taught him that the jungle provided everything a warrior needed if he knew how to ask. How do we fight enemies with metal skin? Asked one of the younger warriors. Taka smiled. The same way we fight any enemy. We use their strengths against them. Their metal skin makes them heavy and slow. Their weapons need power that the jungle has taken away. They are blind and deaf in our world. We are not. The three human forces, military, scientific, and indigenous, began to coordinate their efforts. They didn't need radios or complex communication systems. They used methods that had worked for thousands of years. Bird calls, animal sounds, and signals that only trained eyes could see. Commander Bale began his final march with his remaining soldiers. They moved in a tight formation, weapons ready, scanning the jungle for threats, but they were looking for the wrong kind of enemy. The first attack came from above. Joe and his warriors had positioned themselves in the trees along the aliens' route. They waited until the column was directly below them, then struck with silent precision. Poisoned arrows fell like rain. The aliens' armor protected them from direct hits, but the arrows found gaps at joints and seams. Within minutes, a dozen Krek soldiers were down, convulsing as jungle toxins invaded their bloodstreams. "Contact!" shouted Sergeant Tex, trying to aim his weapon at the trees. But the attackers were already gone, vanished into the green canopy like they had never existed. "Where are they?" demanded Commander Bale. "Where did they go?" The answer came from everywhere and nowhere. The jungle itself seemed to be attacking them. Branches fell at precisely timed moments. Vines tangled their feet. Hidden pits opened under their boots. Every step forward became a battle against the environment itself. Captain Santos and his team struck next. They had positioned themselves along a narrow path that the aliens had to cross. Using tactics perfected in years of jungle warfare, they turned the terrain into their ally. "Take out their leaders first," Santos whispered to his men. "Confusion kills armies faster than bullets." The attack was swift and devastating. Human soldiers emerged from the undergrowth like predators, striking at the alien formation's weak points. They used the jungle's natural cover to appear and disappear at will, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Lieutenant Zorn fell to a sniper's bullet that seemed to come from the trees themselves. 3 squad leaders died in the first minute of the ambush. The alien formation began to break apart as soldiers sought cover behind trees and rocks. But the jungle offered no real shelter. Every hiding place came with its own dangers. Spider nests, snake dens, or patches of ground that gave way to sinkholes filled with murky water and hungry predators. Dr. Lisa watched the battle from a safe distance, still taking notes. "They're not just fighting humans now," she observed. "They're fighting an entire ecosystem that's been turned against them." Carlos nodded. "The jungle recognizes its own. We belong here, they don't. The aliens tried to fight back, but their broken weapons were no match for enemies who knew every rock, every tree, every shadow in the forest. The humans struck and vanished, wearing down the alien force like water wearing away stone. Private Nex found himself separated from his unit during the chaos. He stumbled through the jungle, lost and afraid, his armor torn and his weapon useless. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow could hide an enemy. He came to a small clearing and thought he had found safety, but the clearing was a trap. Joe emerged from the trees like a spirit, his bow drawn and ready. The 2 warriors faced each other across the small space. Alien and human, invader and defender. Please, Private Neck said in his broken English. I don't want to fight anymore, I just want to go home. Joe looked at the alien soldier and saw fear in his eyes. For a moment he hesitated. This creature was young, scared and defeated. But then he remembered his grandfather's words about protecting their home. The arrow flew true. Private Nex fell, without understanding that he had just met Earth's judgment. By nightfall, Commander Bale's army had shrunk to fewer than 200 soldiers. They huddled in a defensive circle, surrounded by sounds of hunting predators and unseen enemies. Their extraction point was still miles away, and they had no idea how many would survive to see it. Sir, a wounded soldier approached Bale. We can't go on like this. We're being hunted. We're dying. Bale looked at his remaining troops. These were the finest warriors in the galaxy, reduced to frightened shadows of their former selves. The jungle had broken them in ways that no enemy army ever could. We keep moving, he said, but his voice was hollow. We reach the extraction point. We complete the mission. But deep in his heart, Commander Bale knew the truth. The mission was already over. They had lost not to superior technology or greater numbers, but to a world that had spent billions of years learning how to kill. As the night deepened, the jungle's nocturnal hunters emerged. Jaguars, snakes, and other predators that had been displaced by the storm were hungry and territorial. The aliens' camp became a feeding ground for creatures that had never seen beings from other worlds, but recognized the smell of weakness and fear. The survivors of the once mighty Krex army could only wait and pray that morning would bring them closer to escape. But in the Amazon, dawn often brought only new dangers. Elder Taka sat by his fire, listening to the sounds of battle in the distance. The Sky Warriors are learning, he told Joe. Learning that strength means nothing without wisdom. Technology means nothing without understanding. Conquest means nothing without respect. Joe nodded. Will any of them survive, Grandfather? Taka looked toward the alien camp and smiled sadly. Perhaps. The jungle will decide. It always does. The final battle was about to begin. Dawn broke over the Amazon with the sound of desperation. Commander Bale counted his remaining soldiers in the pale morning light. 112 warriors stood before him, all that remained of the mighty force that had come to conquer Earth 6 days ago. The extraction point was only 3 miles away, but those 3 miles might as well have been 3,000. The jungle between them and safety was alive with human hunters, displaced predators, and natural traps that seemed designed by nature itself to kill invaders. Sir, Lieutenant Zorn limped forward, his armor cracked and his left arm hanging useless at his side. The men are asking, is retreat possible? Can we call for early extraction? Bale's red eyes blazed with the last flames of his pride. We are Krex warriors, we do not call for help. We reach the extraction point on schedule or we die trying. But even as he spoke those words, Bale knew they were hollow. His army was already dead. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. 3 miles away, Colonel Vega stood at the extraction clearing with 200 elite soldiers. They had arrived during the night, moving through the jungle with the skill that only humans who understood this environment could possess. Set up the perimeter, she ordered. Anti-aircraft weapons on the high ground. If any alien ships try to land here, they won't leave. Captain Santos emerged from the jungle with his reconnaissance team. Colonel, the aliens are moving toward us. Maybe 100 survivors, all wounded, most of their equipment destroyed. Good, Colonel Vega replied. Let them come. Let them see what happens when you underestimate Earth. Dr. Lisa and Carlos had taken position on a ridge overlooking the extraction point. Through her binoculars, Lisa could see the human forces preparing their final trap. But she also saw something else that worried her. Carlos, look at the sky. Those clouds are building again. Carlos followed her gaze and nodded grimly. Another storm system, bigger than the last one. If those aliens don't die in battle, the weather will finish them. The jungle seemed to sense the approaching end. Animals that had been hiding emerged to watch the final act of this deadly play. Howler monkeys called from the trees. Colorful birds sang in the canopy. Even the insects seemed to buzz with anticipation. Elder Taka and his warriors had taken positions along the aliens' route. Joe crouched behind a fallen log, his bow ready, watching the broken army stumble through the forest. These creatures that had once seemed so powerful now looked like lost children. "Grandfather," he whispered, "they're already defeated. Do we need to fight them?" Taka's old eyes were sad but determined. "We fight to protect our home, grandson, but also to send a message to the stars. Earth is not defenseless. Earth is not weak. Earth belongs to those who understand it." The first clash came at a river crossing. The aliens had no choice but to wade through the dark water, exposed and vulnerable. Captain Santos and his team were waiting on the far bank, hidden in the undergrowth. The attack was swift and merciless. Human soldiers emerged from concealment like jungle cats, their weapons finding targets with deadly precision. Alien after alien fell into the muddy water, their blood mixing with the river that had already claimed so many of their comrades. Commander Bale watched his soldiers die and felt something break inside him. Not his body. That was already broken by disease and exhaustion. Something deeper. His belief in Krek's superiority. His faith in conquest through force. His understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. "Fall back," he shouted. But there was nowhere to retreat to. The humans had them surrounded. The jungle was against them, and the sky was preparing to unleash another storm. Private Rex, one of the youngest Krek's soldiers, threw down his broken weapon and raised his hands. "I surrender," he called out in broken English. "Please, I surrender." The human soldiers hesitated. They had been fighting an invasion force, but this creature before them was just a scared child in broken armor. Captain Santos made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "Take him alive," he ordered, "and any others who surrender. They need to take a message back to their people." 7 more aliens threw down their weapons. They were wounded, sick, and completely defeated. The fight had gone out of them like air from a punctured balloon. But Commander Bale was not ready to surrender. With 30 of his most loyal soldiers, he made a final desperate charge toward the extraction point. It was suicide, but it was the only choice that let him die as a Krek's warrior. The charge lasted exactly 90 seconds. Human weapons designed for this environment and maintained by soldiers who understood their tools cut down the aliens with mechanical precision. Commander Bale fell just 50 yards from the clearing where his shuttles were supposed to land. As he lay dying, he looked up at the green canopy overhead and finally understood. This wasn't just a planet. This was a living weapon that had been preparing for invaders for billions of years. Every tree, every animal, every drop of water was part of an immune system designed to destroy threats. The Kreks hadn't lost to humans. They had lost to Earth itself. The storm struck just as the stars screamed. Admiral Kane of the Altarian Federation watched his fleet burn through the bridge windows of the peaceful dawn. 20,000 ships had entered this system just 3 hours ago. Now less than 500 remained, scattered, like dying embers across the void. "Sir, the bioships are moving to the next formation," reported his communications officer, her blue skin pale with fear. They're eating the wreckage." Kane closed his 4 eyes and tried not to think about the crews aboard those destroyed vessels. Good people, peaceful people who had never wanted to fight anyone. But the Devour Swarm didn't care about their peaceful nature. The swarm only cared about consuming everything in its path. "Open a channel to all remaining ships," Kane ordered. "Full retreat to Rally Point 7. The bridge crew worked quickly, their 6-fingered hands dancing over crystal control panels. The Altarians had perfected energy manipulation thousands of years ago. Their ships ran on pure light, their weapons fired concentrated starfire, and their shields could stop almost anything, except the swarm. Kane had watched those biomechanical monsters adapt in real time. When his ships fired energy beams, the swarm ships grew new organs that absorbed the energy and made them stronger. When his ships used gravity weapons, the swarm ships changed their structure to flow around the attacks like liquid metal. The enemy learned, the enemy evolved, and the enemy never stopped coming. "Sir, we're receiving a priority message from High Command." the communications officer said, her voice shaking. Kane straightened his tall, thin frame. Put it through. The holographic image of Supreme Commander Vel appeared above the bridge table. The old Altarian looked tired, his usually bright silver hair now dull with stress. Kane, Vel said, I need you to fall back to the core systems immediately. We're abandoning the Outer Rim. Kane felt his stomach drop. The Outer Rim contained over 300 inhabited worlds. Billions of innocent people lived there. Sir, what about the civilians? We're evacuating what we can, Vel replied, but his voice carried no hope. The Keth Empire has offered to help with their merchant fleets, but there isn't enough time. The swarm moves too fast. Kane knew about the Keth Empire. They were traders and builders, not fighters. Their ships were designed to carry cargo across the galaxy, not to fight wars. Still, they were trying to help save lives. What about the Vex Collective? Kane asked. Surely their technology can find a solution. Vel's expression grew even more grim. The Vex have been studying the swarm for months. They've run every calculation, tested every theory. Their conclusion is that the swarm cannot be stopped with current galactic technology. The bioships adapt too quickly to any weapon we use against them. The line went quiet for a moment. In the background, Kane could hear alarms and voices shouting orders. Even the capital world was preparing for the worst. Kane, Vel continued, I'm sending you new orders. You and the other surviving fleet commanders are to implement Protocol Final Hope. Kane had heard whispers about Protocol Final Hope, but he had never seen the actual orders. Sir, what exactly does that involve? We're going to send out a distress call to the entire galaxy. Every frequency, every language we know, broadcast on continuous loop. We're asking for help from anyone who can provide military assistance. Kane felt a chill run down his spine. Sir, that will reveal our location to every unknown species in the galaxy. We could be inviting something worse than the swarm. At this point, Kane, I don't think anything could be worse than the swarm. The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts and his dying fleet. 2 days later, Kane stood in the emergency council chamber on the planet Harmony. The great crystal dome above showed the night sky, where refugee ships from a dozen worlds hung in orbit like lost children. Around the circular table sat the leaders of the 3 great galactic powers. Ambassador Kell represented what remained of the Altarian Federation. Scholar Prime Vex spoke for the collective's research stations. Trade Master Lorik came on behalf of the Keth Empire's merchant guilds. The distress signal has been broadcasting for 48 hours, Scholar Prime Vex reported. His people looked like tall, gray-skinned humans with oversized heads full of incredible intelligence. We have received responses from 17 known species, but none can offer military assistance. They are all facing the swarm in their own territories. Trademaster Lorik, whose people resembled upright lizards with colorful scales, hissed in frustration. My merchant fleets have evacuated 4 million civilians, but the swarm destroyed 3 more systems yesterday. We cannot save them all. Ambassador Kell, the most diplomatic of Kane's people, maintained her calm voice. Then we continue broadcasting. Somewhere in the galaxy, there must be a species with the military strength to help us. The probability is low, Scholar Prime Vex said, consulting his data tablet. We have mapped 80% of the galaxy. Most species follow similar technological development paths. Energy manipulation, gravity control, quantum mechanics. The swarm has evolved to counter all known forms of advanced warfare. Kane spoke up from his position near the window. What about unknown forms of warfare? The 3 leaders looked at him. Explain, Scholar Prime Vex said. The swarm adapts to our technology because it's based on the same principles every advanced species uses. But what if there's a species out there that developed differently? What if they use techniques we've never seen? Trademaster Lorik's scales changed to a doubtful purple color. Any species capable of interstellar travel must have mastered the same basic technologies we have. Energy manipulation is required for faster-than-light travel. There is no other way. Kane wanted to argue, but he knew Lorik was probably right. Every spacefaring species they had ever met followed the same general pattern of development. First, they learned to manipulate matter, then energy, then gravity and space-time itself. It was the natural progression of scientific advancement. "Sir," Kane's aide approached quietly. "We're receiving a response to the distress signal." The room fell silent. "Put it through," Ambassador Kell ordered. The communication system crackled to life, filled with static and interference. Then a voice came through, speaking in a language none of them had ever heard. The translation software worked for several seconds before providing subtitles. "Unknown vessels, this is Deep Space Monitoring Station Echo 7 of the Terran Defense Network. We have received your distress call and are forwarding it to High Command. Please provide your coordinates and tactical situation." Message repeats. "This is Echo 7 of the Terran Defense Network." The four leaders stared at each other in shock. "Terran," Scholar Prime Vex whispered. "I have never heard of this species." Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to excited yellow. "A new species. Perhaps they have not encountered the swarm yet. They could provide sanctuary for our refugees." But Kane noticed something the others had missed. "Did you hear what they called themselves? The Terran Defense Network. Not Exploration Service, not Scientific Collective, not Trade Federation. Defense Network." Ambassador Kell nodded slowly. "They identify themselves by their military organization." "Curious," Scholar Prime Vex mused. "Most peaceful species do not prioritize military identification in first contact situations." Over the next 6 hours, they exchanged messages with the Terrans. The aliens learned that this new species came from a world called Earth, located in an unexplored arm of the galaxy. The Terrans asked detailed questions about the swarm's capabilities, tactics, and technology. Their questions were unusual. Most species asked about the swarm's energy patterns or quantum signatures. The Terrans asked about physical composition, structural weak points, and something they called blast radius effectiveness. Finally, a new message arrived. "Altarian vessel Peaceful Dawn. This is Admiral Blake of the Terran vessel Retribution. We are en route to your coordinates. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Maintain current position and prepare tactical briefing materials. Be advised, we are coming armed for full military engagement." Kane read the message 3 times. "They're actually coming," he whispered. "One ship," Trademaster Lorik said sadly, "against thousands of swarm vessels." "Perhaps they have allies following behind," Ambassador Kell suggested hopefully. Scholar Prime Vex was already running calculations on his tablet. "Based on their message pattern and transmission strength, I estimate their vessel displacement at approximately 2,000 meters, modest size for a warship." Kane stared out at the stars, wondering what kind of people called themselves a defense network and traveled across the galaxy to fight someone else's war. In 72 hours, he would find out. The stars still screamed, but now, perhaps for the first time in months, they also whispered hope. Captain Torres stepped through the airlock of the alien ship and immediately felt wrong. Everything was too clean, too bright. The walls glowed with soft blue light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The floor felt warm beneath. His boots and the air smelled like flowers from a garden he had never seen. "This is definitely not a warship," he muttered into his helmet radio. "Copy that, Captain," came Admiral Blake's voice from the Retribution. "Stay alert. Remember, we don't know their intentions yet." Torres looked back at his escort team. Sergeant Miller carried a standard assault rifle, while Corporal Jackson had a shotgun slung across his back. Both weapons looked crude and primitive, compared to the crystalline walls around them. An alien approached them from down the corridor. Torres had seen the pictures during the briefing, but seeing one in person was different. The Altarian was tall and thin, with blue skin that sparkled like starlight. She had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and her movements were graceful like a dancer. "Welcome aboard the Peaceful Dawn," she said in perfect English. "I am Communications Officer Zara. Admiral Kane is waiting for you in the council chamber." Torres nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked through the ship, Torres noticed more things that bothered him. The corridors were wide and open, with no defensive positions. The crew members they passed wore flowing robes instead of uniforms. He saw no weapons, no armor, no security checkpoints. "Officer Zara, Torres said. How many crew members are on this ship? Approximately 8,000, she replied. The Peaceful Dawn is a colony ship that was converted for military use when the swarm arrived. Torres stopped walking. 8,000 people on one ship? How do you feed them all? Where do they sleep? Zara smiled with what Torres assumed was kindness. Our ships are grown, not built. The biomatter adjusts itself to provide everything we need. Food, shelter, even air and water are produced by the ship's living systems. Your ships are alive? In a sense, yes. We merged our technology with organic materials centuries ago. It is much more efficient than the old methods of construction. Torres felt a chill run down his spine. Living ships. He made a mental note. To report this to Admiral Blake immediately. They entered a vast chamber with a ceiling that showed the stars outside. Around a circular table sat 3 aliens of different species. Torres recognized them from the briefing files. Admiral Kane stood, up first. He was even taller than Officer Zara, with silver hair and kind eyes. Captain Torres, welcome. I am Admiral Kane of the Altarian Federation. The gray-skinned alien with the large head spoke next. Scholar Prime Vex of the Collective. We are pleased to meet representatives of your species. The lizard-like creature with colorful scales nodded. Trade Master Lorik of the Keth Empire. Your arrival gives us hope, Torres saluted crisply. Captain Torres, Terran Defense Network. I'm here to assess the tactical situation and coordinate with Admiral Blake. The 3 aliens exchanged glances. Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward. Captain, we must ask, how many ships is your species sending to assist us? Just one, Torres replied. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Just one? Admiral Kane asked carefully. The retribution is our response to your distress call. Torres confirmed. Trademaster Lorik's scales changed to a worried brown color. Captain, perhaps you do not understand the scale of the threat. The swarm has thousands of ships, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. I understand perfectly, Torres said. Admiral Blake has reviewed all the tactical data you provided. We're confident we can handle the situation. Scholar Prime Vex activated a holographic display above the table. Captain, perhaps you should see what we are facing. The hologram showed a battle scene. Hundreds of elegant alien ships fired beams of pure energy at dark, twisted bioships. The swarm vessels absorbed the energy attacks and grew larger. When the aliens switched to gravity weapons, the bioships simply flowed around the attacks like liquid. These recordings are from the Battle of Nexus Prime, Scholar Prime Vex explained. We lost 3,000 ships in 6 hours. The swarm adapted to every weapon we used. Torres watched the display with professional interest. Impressive. They're like a biological computer virus, but in space. Captain, Admiral Kane said gently, your ship appears to be quite small compared to our vessels. How exactly do you plan to fight the swarm? We have our methods, Torres replied. Now I need to know about your evacuation procedures. When the fighting starts, how quickly can you get your civilian ships to safety? The 3 aliens looked at each other again. Captain, Trademaster Lorik said slowly, you keep talking as if victory is certain. But the swarm has never been defeated. Every species that has fought them has either been destroyed or forced to retreat. Then they haven't fought humans yet, Torres said simply. Officer Zara, who had been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. Captain, may I ask about your weapons? Our sensors show that your ship uses some kind of chemical propulsion system. Very primitive. Torres smiled. Primitive is one word for it. How do your weapons work? Scholar Prime Vex asked. Do you use energy manipulation, gravity distortion, quantum field generators? We use kinetic force, Torres replied. The aliens looked confused. Kinetic force? Admiral Kane asked. You mean, you throw things at your enemies? In a manner of speaking, yes. Scholar Prime Vex's large eyes blinked several times. Captain, kinetic weapons were abandoned by most species thousands of years ago. They are inefficient compared to energy-based systems. That depends on what you're trying to accomplish, Torres said. But how do you achieve faster than light? Travel without energy manipulation? Trademaster Lorik asked. How do you power your ship? Torres thought about how to explain nuclear reactors to beings who had never heard of splitting atoms. We use controlled explosions. Explosions? Officer. Zara looked horrified. That sounds extremely dangerous. It can be, Torres admitted, but it's also very effective. Admiral Kane leaned back in his chair. Captain, I appreciate your confidence, but I think you may not fully understand what we're facing. The swarm learns from every battle. If your kinetic weapon fail to stop them, they will adapt and become immune to that type of attack. They can adapt to things they've seen before, Torres said, but they can't adapt to things that kill them completely. What do you mean? Scholar Prime Vex asked. Torres stood up and walked to the holographic display. He pointed at one of the swarm ships. Your energy weapons feed them power. Your gravity weapons just move them around. But what happens when you hit something so hard that it stops existing? The room fell quiet. Captain, Admiral Kane said carefully, are you suggesting that your species uses weapons designed to completely destroy targets? All weapons are designed to destroy targets, Torres replied. The question is how efficiently they do it. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to a pale yellow. Captain, most galactic species have moved beyond destructive warfare. We prefer to disable enemy vessels so that conflicts can be resolved diplomatically. Torres stared at the alien. You're trying to negotiate with a species that eats planets? Well, no, but then you need to start thinking about destruction instead of diplomacy. Officer Zara spoke up hesitantly. Captain, your species sounds very aggressive. Are you certain you wish to help us? We are peaceful people. Torres softened, his tone slightly. Ma'am, my species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that sometimes the only way to protect peaceful people is to be very, very good at destroying the things that threaten them. Admiral Kane stood up slowly. Captain Torres, I think it would be best if you return to your ship. We need to discuss this situation among ourselves. Of course, Torres said. But Admiral, I suggest you start moving your civilian ships to a safe distance. Admiral Blake plans to engage the swarm in approximately 18 hours. 18 hours? Scholar Prime Vex looked shocked. But we haven't finished analyzing their attack patterns. We don't need to analyze them, Torres said as he headed for the door. We just need to kill them. As Torres and his team left the alien ship, he heard Trademaster Lorik whisper to the others, what kind of species treats warfare like a simple problem to be solved? Torres smiled inside his helmet. The kind that wins, he said quietly. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Blake was waiting in the briefing room. Report, Captain. Sir, they're not warriors. They're gardeners who got forced into a fight they don't understand. Blake nodded. And the enemy? Adaptive bioships that learn from energy-based attacks. They've never faced kinetic weapons or chemical explosives. Perfect, Blake said. Signal the fleet. Tell them we're going hunting. Torres paused. Sir, there's something else. The aliens think we're crazy. Admiral Blake smiled coldly. Captain, anyone who brings a knife to a gunfight is going to think the guy with the gun is crazy. Right up, until they're dead. The Retribution continued its approach to the battlefront, carrying with it the concentrated fury of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Dr. Hayes stared at the alien battle recordings for the 100th time, her coffee growing cold on the lab table beside her. The Retribution's science officer had been studying the swarm for 3 days straight, and what she found both fascinated and terrified her. Computer replay Section 7 Alpha, she commanded. The holographic display showed a close-up view of a swarm bioship taking direct hits from Altarian energy weapons. Hayes watched as the creature's hull absorbed the energy and immediately began growing new organic structures. Within minutes, the ship was not only repaired, but actually larger than before. Incredible, she whispered. They're not just adapting, they're evolving in real time. The lab door opened and Admiral Blake walked in. The commander of the Retribution looked tired but alert. He had been studying tactical reports while Hayes worked on the scientific analysis. "What's your assessment, Doctor?" Blake asked. Hayes turned away from the display. "Admiral, these things are biological computers. Every time they encounter a new weapon, they instantly develop a defense against it. Energy absorption, kinetic deflection, even quantum field manipulation. They've seen it all." "But they haven't seen our weapons yet," Blake said. "No, sir. And that's what gives us an advantage." Hayes activated a new display showing the periodic table. "Admiral, every advanced species in the galaxy follows the same technological path. They start with basic chemistry, then move to energy manipulation, then to quantum mechanics. It's the natural progression." Blake nodded. "And once they master energy weapons, they abandon the old methods." "Exactly. Chemical explosives become obsolete when you can fire concentrated starlight. Kinetic weapons seem primitive when you can manipulate gravity itself." Hayes pointed to the battle recordings. "The swarm has evolved specifically to counter advanced galactic technology. But humans never fully abandoned the old ways. We just made them better," Blake said with a slight smile. Hayes activated another display showing technical specifications. "Admiral, I've been analyzing our weapons compared to what the aliens use. Our nuclear warheads produce temperatures of 100 million degrees. The aliens' energy weapons produce temperatures of maybe 10 million degrees. And the kinetic penetrators? Our railgun slugs hit with more force than anything the swarm has ever encountered. The aliens use gravity weapons that push and pull. We use weapons that simply destroy whatever they hit." Blake studied the data. "What about their regeneration capabilities?" Hayes shook her head. "That's the key point, Admiral. The swarm can regenerate from damage. They can rebuild destroyed sections, regrow lost organs, even reproduce entire ship systems, but they can't regenerate from nothing." "Complete molecular destruction," Blake said. "Exactly. If there's nothing left to regenerate from, they can't adapt to it." The intercom crackled to life. "Admiral Blake to the bridge. Priority alert." Blake left the lab and walked quickly to the command center. Captain Torres was waiting at the tactical station, looking grim. "Report," Blake ordered. "Sir, we've reached the Nexus system. The alien fleets are in position, but we have a problem." Torres activated the main display. The screen showed space filled with thousands of ships. The combined fleets of 3 galactic civilizations hung in defensive formations around a massive space station. But beyond them, at the edge of the system, something else was coming. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Ross from the navigation station. The swarm approached like a living nightmare. Thousands of bioships moved through space in perfect coordination. They looked like a cross between sea creatures and machines, with organic hulls that pulsed with dark energy. Some were small and fast, darting around like predatory fish. Others were massive, kilometer-long monsters that could swallow entire cruisers. "Estimated enemy count?" Blake asked. "At least 8,000 ships, sir. Possibly more hiding behind the main formation." Blake watched the tactical display. The alien fleets had maybe 2,000 ships total. Even with their advanced technology, they were outnumbered 4-1. "Sir," Communications Officer Park reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kane." "Put it through." Kane's holographic image appeared on the bridge. The Altarian looked even more worried than before. "Admiral Blake, the swarm has arrived sooner than expected. Our scouts report they've adapted new defensive measures since the last battle. They're stronger than ever." "Understood, Admiral Kane. Are your evacuation ships clear of the combat zone?" "Most of them, yes. But Admiral, I must ask again, are you certain one ship is enough? We could delay the battle until more of your fleet arrives." Blake looked at his bridge crew. Every officer was focused on their station, calm and professional despite the overwhelming odds. These were people who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. "Admiral Kane, this is our fleet. We're ready to engage." Kane's 4 eyes blinked in what Blake assumed was confusion. "Admiral, I don't understand. How can you be so confident?" "Because, Admiral Kane, we're very good at what we do." The transmission ended. Blake turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Reed, status report." Commander Reed, a stocky man with gray hair and steady hands, checked his displays. All weapon systems online, Admiral. Nuclear torpedoes armed and ready. Railgun batteries loaded with depleted uranium penetrators. Kinetic bombardment system. Standing by. Plasma cannons. Charged and ready, sir. Point defense systems are active. Blake nodded and opened a general communication channel. All hands, this is the Admiral. In approximately 1 hour, we will engage a hostile force that has terrorized this galaxy for months. These creatures have adapted to every form of advanced warfare known to galactic civilization. He paused, looking around at his crew. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know that we've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing things that need to be killed. They don't know that our primitive weapons can crack planets in half. And they don't know that when humanity goes to war, we don't fight to disable or capture, we fight to win. The bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics. Today, we show the galaxy what human warfare looks like. Today we remind the universe why peaceful species should be grateful that we're on their side. Blake sat down in his command chair. All stations, prepare for combat operations. On the main screen, the swarm continued its approach. The bioships moved with predatory grace, confident in their superiority. They had destroyed every enemy they had ever faced. They had adapted to every weapon, survived every attack, consumed every world in their path. But they had never met the species that invented warfare, and then spent millennia making it into an art form. Admiral Kane watched from his flagship as the small human vessel moved toward the center of the defensive formation. The Retribution looked tiny compared to the massive alien ships around it. Its hull was dark gray metal instead of living crystal. Its weapons were simple-looking tubes and boxes instead of elegant energy projectors. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ship is requesting all friendly vessels move to minimum safe distance." "How far is minimum safe distance?" Kane asked. There was a pause while the officer translated the human measurements. "Approximately 50,000 kilometers, sir." Kane stared at the tactical display. 50,000 kilometers? What kind of weapons require that much safe distance? He was about to find out. The swarm reached the outer edge of the system and began to accelerate. Thousands of bioships surged forward like a tide of living darkness. Their hulls began to glow as they prepared their adaptive weapon systems. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Blake watched the enemy approach with cold calculation. "Range to target?" he asked. 2 million kilometers in closing, Lieutenant Ross reported. "Sir," Commander Reed said, "the enemy formation is spreading out. They're trying to surround us." Blake nodded. "Let them come. The more spread out they are, the more we can hit at once." He leaned forward in his chair. "All weapons, prepare to fire on my command." The swarm ships began to glow brighter as they entered their attack formation. Energy patterns danced along their organic hulls as they prepared to unleash the same devastating attacks that had destroyed hundreds of fleets. "Admiral," Captain Torres said quietly, "they're beautiful in a way, like deadly ocean creatures." Blake smiled coldly. "Captain, in 30 seconds they're going to learn why humans are the apex predators of this galaxy." He opened the fleet communication channel one last time. "All vessels, this is Admiral Blake. Clear the engagement zone immediately. Retribution is going weapons hot." The human ship charged directly into the center of the swarm formation, alone against 8,000 enemies. It was exactly where humanity wanted to be. 3 hours after the battle, Admiral Kane still couldn't stop his hands from shaking. He stood in the observation deck of the Peaceful Dawn, staring out at the debris field that had once been the swarm fleet. Clouds of glowing plasma drifted slowly through space like the ghosts of 8,000 nightmares. In the distance, the human ship Retribution hung motionless, its dark hull showing no signs of damage. "Sir," Communications Officer Zara said softly behind him, "the humans are requesting a diplomatic meeting. They want to discuss the situation." Kane turned away from the window. "Where do they want to meet?" "They've invited all 3 species representatives aboard their vessel." Kane felt a chill. After what he had just witnessed, the idea of being inside a human warship terrified him. But he was a leader, and leaders had responsibilities. Inform Scholar Prime Vex and Trademaster Lorik. We'll meet them at the airlock in 1 hour. The inside of the Retribution was nothing like the alien ships. Where Altarian vessels were filled with light and living beauty, the human ship was dark and functional. The corridors were narrow and lined with pipes and cables. The walls were painted a dull gray color, and everything smelled like metal and electricity. Kane walked between Captain Torres and a human soldier who carried a weapon Kane didn't recognize. Behind him, Scholar Prime Vex and Trademaster Lorik moved in nervous silence. Your ship is very practical, Scholar Prime Vex observed, trying to make conversation. It's designed for war, Captain Torres replied simply. Everything else is secondary. They entered a briefing room where Admiral Blake waited at a metal table. The human admiral looked exactly like Kane had expected, calm, professional, and completely unbothered by the fact that he had just committed genocide against an entire species. Gentlemen, Blake said, gesturing to chairs across from him. Please sit. The 3 alien leaders sat down carefully. The chairs were hard and uncomfortable, designed for function rather than comfort. Admiral Blake, Kane began, on behalf of the Altarian Federation, I want to thank you for your assistance. You saved millions of lives today. Blake nodded. You're welcome. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to a cautious orange color. Admiral, we must ask, how many ships does your species possess? That's classified information, Blake replied. But surely you can give us some indication of your military capabilities? Scholar Prime Vex pressed. The galactic community will want to know about humanity's strength. Blake considered for a moment. The Retribution is one of 12 vessels in its class. Earth's defensive fleet numbers approximately 400 ships of various types. The aliens exchanged glances. Kane felt his stomach drop. 400 ships like this one? He asked weakly. No, Blake said. The Retribution is our newest design. Most of our fleet consists of older vessels with less advanced weapons. Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward. Less advanced than what we just witnessed? The first-generation ships only carry fusion warheads, instead of antimatter weapons, and their railguns are limited to 15% of light speed. Kane realized he was holding his breath. Trademaster Lorik's scales had turned pale yellow. Admiral, what is the size of human territory? Currently, we control 237 star systems, Blake replied, though we're expanding into new sectors regularly. The briefing room fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Scholar Prime Vex spoke first. Admiral, your species controls more territory than the entire Altarian Federation. And you have more military ships than all 3 of our species combined, Trademaster Lorik added. Blake shrugged. We've been busy. Kane found his voice. Admiral, if humanity is so powerful, why haven't we encountered you before? Why haven't you made contact with the galactic community? Blake's expression grew slightly amused. Because we've been fighting each other. Fighting each other? Scholar Prime Vex looked confused. Humanity isn't unified the way your species are, Blake explained. We have dozens of different nations and political systems. We spend most of our time arguing with each other about borders, resources, and ideological differences. You mean, Kane said slowly, you use these weapons against other humans? Constantly, Blake confirmed. The Retribution was originally designed to fight the Mars Colonial Alliance. Before that, we had the Jupiter Mining War, the Titan Independence Conflict, and the Great Asteroid Belt Dispute. Trademaster Lorik's scales were now completely white. You've been having wars in space for how long? About 300 years, give or take. Scholar Prime Vex calculated quickly in his head. Admiral, if humanity has been fighting wars with these weapons for 3 centuries, your species must have an incredible understanding of military tactics and strategy. Blake nodded. We've learned a few things. Kane realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. The galactic species had abandoned military conflicts centuries ago in favor of diplomatic solutions. They had kept their weapons for defense against unknown threats. but they had never actually used them in anger. Humans, on the other hand, had been perfecting the art of killing for their entire spacefaring history. "Admiral," Kane said carefully, "what are humanity's intentions toward the galactic community? Do you plan to expand your territory into our space?" Blake looked genuinely surprised. "Why would we want to do that? You're not threatening us. And conquest is expensive. We prefer to fight people who actually deserve it." "But surely humanity wants something in return for your assistance today?" Trademaster Lorik asked. Blake considered this. "We're interested in establishing trade relationships. Some of your technologies could be useful for civilian applications, and we're always looking for new markets for our industrial products." Scholar Prime Vex looked relieved. "Trade we can do. The collective has many scientific innovations that could benefit your people." "What kind of industrial products does humanity manufacture?" Trademaster Lorik asked, his merchant instincts taking over. Blake smiled slightly. "Weapons, mostly." The alien leaders stared at him. "You manufacture weapons for export?" Kane asked. "It's one of our major industries," Blake confirmed. "Different. Human nations have different specialties. The European Union makes the best energy weapons. The Asian Confederation produces superior kinetic systems. The American Federation leads in missile technology." Trademaster Lorik's scales shifted to an interested green. "There might be a market for human weapons among species who face external threats." "Perhaps," Blake said. "But we'd need to establish formal diplomatic relations first." Scholar Prime Vex leaned forward eagerly. "The Galactic Council would be honored to welcome humanity as a member species. Your technological contributions would be invaluable." Blake shook his head. "I don't have the authority to make that decision. You'd need to negotiate with Earth's government directly." "Of course," Kane said quickly. "We would be happy to send ambassadors to your homeworld." "That can be arranged," Blake replied. "Though I should warn you, Earth politics can be complicated." The meeting continued for another hour, covering trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and communication protocols. By the end, Kane felt like his understanding of the galaxy had been completely overturned. As they prepared to leave, Scholar Prime Vex asked one final question. "Admiral Blake, may I ask why your species decided to help us? You could have ignored our distress call and remained hidden." Blake stood up and walked to a small window showing the debris field outside. "Scholar, my people have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that there are two types of beings in the universe, those who protect the innocent and those who prey on the weak." He turned back to face the alien leaders. "The swarm were predators. You were innocent. The choice was simple." Kane felt a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. Humanity was the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. Their casual attitude toward massive destruction was terrifying. But they had used that terrible power to protect people they had never met. "Admiral," Kane said, "I hope our species can build a lasting friendship." Blake nodded. "So do I. But remember this, Admiral Kane. Humanity didn't save you because we're peaceful. We saved you because we're good at war." As the alien delegation returned to their ships, Kane realized that the galaxy had just gained its most powerful protector. The question was whether the other species would be wise enough to stay on humanity's good side. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Blake watched the alien ships preparing to depart. Captain Torres joined him at the observation window. "Think, they'll cause us any trouble, sir?" Torres asked. Blake smiled. "Captain, after today, I think they're more afraid of making us angry than anything else in the galaxy. And Earth's reaction to all this? They'll want to know if there are any other threats out here worth fighting." Torres chuckled. "I'll prepare. The report. Should I mention that we might have accidentally terrified 3 entire civilizations into permanent friendship?" Blake thought about it. "Captain, sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to be very, very good at war." The Retribution turned toward home, carrying with it the news that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. More importantly, it carried the message that the galaxy now had guardians who would answer when innocent people called for help. The first nuclear torpedo left the Retribution at 0947 ship time. Commander Reed watched the weapon streak across space toward the nearest swarm bioship. The torpedo was small compared to the massive alien vessels, barely visible on the tactical display, but Reed knew what was inside that simple metal casing. Impact in 15 seconds, he reported calmly. Admiral Blake stood behind the weapons console, his hands clasped behind his back. Around the bridge, every officer watched their displays with professional focus. No one spoke. No one moved unnecessarily. The torpedo hit the swarm ship dead center. For a split second, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to catch fire. Nuclear explosion created a miniature star that burned at 100 million degrees. The bioship simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. Where a kilometer-long alien vessel had been floating 1 second before, now there was only expanding plasma and radiation. Target eliminated, Reed announced. The swarm formation paused for just a moment, as if confused by what had just happened. They had adapted to every weapon the galaxy had thrown at them. Energy beams made them stronger. Gravity weapons barely moved them. Quantum attacks were absorbed and redirected. But nothing in their evolutionary history had prepared them for the raw fury of a splitting atom. Fire pattern alpha, Blake ordered. Reed's fingers danced across his control panel. Pattern alpha, firing now. 20 nuclear torpedoes launched simultaneously from the Retribution's missile tubes. They spread out in a wide formation, each one targeting a different swarm ship. The biovessels tried to move out of the way, but the torpedoes were guided by human technology that had been perfected through countless wars. 20 miniature suns bloomed across the battlefield. When the light faded, 20 swarm ships had ceased to exist. Not damaged, not disabled, completely removed from reality at the molecular level. On the bridge of the peaceful dawn, Admiral Kane watched in stunned silence. His tactical officer, a young Altarian named Vex, stared at her displays. "In disbelief, sir," Vex whispered. "Our sensors show complete matter conversion. The swarm ships aren't just destroyed, they're gone." Kane had fought the swarm for months. He had seen their ships regenerate from the worst damage imaginable. He had watched them grow stronger after every attack. But this was different. There was nothing left to regenerate from. "What kind of weapons do this?" he asked no one in particular. The swarm began to react. The remaining bioships shifted their formation and charged toward the lone human vessel. Energy patterns rippled along their hulls as they prepared to unleash their adaptive weapons. But the Retribution wasn't finished. "Railgun batteries. Target. The leading edge," Blake commanded. Lieutenant Commander Steele, the ship's gunnery officer, locked onto the approaching swarm vessels. Targets acquired. Firing. The railgun system was humanity's answer to long-range precision warfare. Magnetic fields accelerated depleted uranium slugs to 20% of light speed. Each projectile carried the kinetic energy of a small asteroid. The first salvo of railgun rounds crossed the distance to the swarm in seconds. The bioships tried to activate their adaptive armor, the same organic defenses that had turned aside every kinetic weapon the galaxy had ever used. The uranium slugs punched through their hulls like they were made of paper. The rounds didn't just penetrate the swarm ships. They liquefied everything they touched. The kinetic energy was so massive that the bioship's organic matter was instantly converted to superheated plasma. Entire sections of the alien vessels simply ceased to exist. "Multiple hits confirmed," Steele reported. "Estimate 70%. Kill ratio on first salvo." Blake nodded. "Continue firing. Don't give them time to adapt." The railgun batteries fired again and again. Each shot removed another swarm vessel from existence. The bioships tried desperately to evolve new defenses, growing thicker armor and energy shields. But there was no defense against pure kinetic force delivered at relativistic speeds. The swarm ships began to spread out, trying to present fewer targets. Some of them returned fire with their bioenergy weapons. Streams of adaptive plasma and quantum disruption fields lanced toward the Retribution. The human ship's point defense systems activated. Close-in weapon systems designed to stop incoming missiles opened up with streams of depleted uranium bullets. Each gun fired 4,000 rounds per minute, creating walls of metal that intercepted the swarm's energy attacks. The bullets absorbed the bioenergy and continued on their ballistic paths, striking swarm ships and punching holes through their hulls. "Point defense is holding," reported Chief Petty Officer Martinez from the Defensive Systems Station. "All incoming fire neutralized." Blake watched the tactical display as the swarm tried new attack patterns. The bioships were learning, adapting their strategies in real time. But they couldn't adapt to weapons that simply erased them from existence. "Sir," Commander Reed said, "the enemy formation is trying to surround us. Should we evade?" Blake smiled, coldly. "Commander, when has humanity ever run from a fight?" He activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, prepare for kinetic bombardment operations." In the weapons bay deep inside the Retribution, automated systems began loading the ship's most devastating weapons. Kinetic bombardment rods, simple tubes of tungsten and titanium designed to be accelerated to incredible speeds. The concept was ancient in human terms. Take a heavy object and throw it very, very hard. But humanity had refined the idea over centuries of warfare. Each rod was perfectly balanced, magnetically accelerated, and guided by targeting computers that could track a coin from orbit. "Bombardment. System ready," Reed reported. "Fire." The kinetic rods launched from the Retribution like vengeful lightning bolts. They accelerated to speeds that made railgun slugs look slow. When they hit the swarm ships, the results were catastrophic. Each impact released the energy of a small nuclear weapon, but without the radiation. The bioships simply exploded into fragments that were then vaporized by the kinetic energy transfer. Entire sections of the swarm formation disappeared in seconds. Admiral Kane watched the slaughter from his bridge, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The unstoppable force that had terrorized the galaxy for months was being systematically annihilated by a single human vessel using weapons that any galactic species would consider primitive. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from Scholar Prime Vex." Kane activated the channel. The gray-skinned alien's image appeared on his screen, his large eyes wide with shock. "Kane," Vex said, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it, but I don't believe it," Kane replied. "The humans, their weapons. They're using controlled nuclear fusion as a standard attack, and those kinetic projectile, the energy release is beyond anything in our databases." Kane watched as another group of swarm ships vanished under human fire. "How is this possible? Their technology appears so primitive." "Primitive?" Vex's voice cracked. "Kane, they've weaponized the fundamental forces of the universe. They're not using energy manipulation or quantum mechanics. They're using the raw power of atomic destruction and relativistic physics." On the Retribution, Admiral Blake calmly observed the battle's progress. The swarm had lost over half their ships, and the survivors were beginning to show signs of panic. Some biovessels were trying to flee, while others continued their futile attacks. "Commander Reed," Blake said, "prepare the plasma cannons." Reed's eyes lit up. The plasma cannons were the Retribution's most advanced weapons, designed specifically for targets that conventional weapons couldn't handle. "Plasma systems charging," Reed reported. "Target selection?" Blake pointed at the largest swarm ship, a massive biovessel that was trying to coordinate the remaining enemy forces. "That one. Show them what happens when humans get serious about warfare." The plasma cannons fired. Twin beams of contained stellar fire reached across space and touched the swarm command ship. The biovessel's hull began to glow, then melt, then transform into superheated gas. The ship didn't explode. It simply converted from solid matter to plasma in a process that took less than 3 seconds. The remaining swarm ships stopped moving. For the first time in their species' history, they had encountered something they couldn't adapt to, couldn't overcome, couldn't survive. "Sir," Captain Torres said quietly, "the enemy formation is breaking up. They're trying to retreat." Blake shook his head. "No survivors. We can't risk them learning from this encounter and adapting." The Retribution continued its methodical destruction of the swarm fleet. Nuclear torpedoes, railgun slugs, kinetic bombardment, Rods and plasma beams reached out across space like the weapons of an angry god. Each shot removed another piece of the threat that had terrorized civilized space. 47 minutes after the battle began, the last swarm ship died in nuclear fire. Space was quiet, except for the expanding clouds of plasma that had once been 8,000 biovessels. Admiral Kane stared at his tactical display, which now showed empty space where the swarm had been. His hands shook as he activated the communication system. Retribution, this is Admiral Kane. Do you require assistance? Blake's voice came back calm and professional. Negative, Admiral Kane. All targets eliminated. The Nexus system is secure. Kane looked around his bridge at the shocked faces of his crew. They had just witnessed the complete